So thanks for joining, everyone. We're going to kick off now. We're right on 10 o'clock, so thanks for joining on time. To our attendees, welcome to our webinar. This is a chance to be part of our live UX portfolio review webinar. I'm Chris Ventura, the CEO of Harness Projects. And for those of you joining our webinars for the first time, Harness Projects is an education provider. We teach UX design programs in a real project learning model. So what that basically means is that when students join our course, they're working on live company challenges while we train them. We pride ourselves on being the only provider that really helps students gain skills and experience as a UX designer all in the one course. So in this webinar, we will be observing 3 of our recent Harness Projects graduates who will present their portfolio work that they generated during our course to 3 industry leaders and Harness Projects mentors. So really, this is an opportunity for everyone to get insights into what hiring managers are looking for in a portfolio demonstration, which is a really common part of the UX UI job interview process. There will be 3 portfolios reviewed by our panel tonight. Each portfolio covers a different project focus area. So we will start with a UI design project completed by Kate for an organization called So to Speak, followed by Laura's UX research project with Veggie Saver. And then we'll finish off with Keena's end-to-end UX UI project completed with a tech firm called BizMiner. Now, to help us understand what works and what doesn't, I'm joined by a panel of UX hiring managers and Harness Projects mentors. So I'd please like to welcome Natalie Troxel, Senior UX Research at Kajabi. Welcome, Natalie. Give us a wave. And Chad Rupp, Senior UX Designer at Amazon. Welcome, Chad. And Rebecca Walsh, Senior Product Designer at Mailchimp. Hello, hello. So between them all, they've probably reviewed over hundreds of UX portfolios throughout their careers. So they will be providing feedback to 3 of our courageous Harness Projects graduates who will be presenting tonight. So I'd like to welcome Kate, Laura, and Keena, who each have recently graduated from our Career Launcher UX program at Harness Projects. So welcome to you all.
Thank you, Chris.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries. It goes without saying to everyone in attendance that conducting a portfolio demonstration in front of a live audience can be a daunting task. So I really want to congratulate Kate, Laura, and Keena for stepping up and agreeing to be a part of this for all of our benefit. This session is really a learning opportunity for all of us, with the intention that you can all come away with from this experience with some practical insights to help support you in your job search. Now, at the end of each of the segments, there will be time for the panelists to provide feedback to the graduates. And at the end of the webinar, we will allow a bit of time for Q&A from the audience as well. So in order to get your questions answered, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to kick off the first portfolio demonstration with Kate, presenting her UI design project with So to Speak. Kate, do you want to share screen and take it away?
Thank you. And thank you to all the panelists that are here, mentors reviewing as well. So I'll just get started. I'm Kate. I'm based out of California. I've got a background in psychology and a work history in client-facing roles. So I just have an intrinsic interest in understanding human needs and a sincere passion for problem solving. So I'm excited to be presenting this case study that was done with a company called So to Speak. And so brief table of contents that will outline the entire project. I'll cover a little background on So to Speak, what their problems were that they were facing, the interviews that I conducted with the stakeholder, so to speak, and user interviews, and how those interviews helped shape my design focus for the project, sketches that I created based on these design ideas, testing those sketches, the outcome of those testings, and then my reflection on the entire process. So to Speak, ultimately, it's a family messaging app that's designed for promoting a healthy relationship for kids with technology. And how they aim to do this is limit the number of text messages allowed per day, and removing all app notifications. So there aren't any distracting notifications that are constantly directing kids' attention away from being in the present. And they also like to serve as an educational tool for parents by providing articles and resources regarding how parents can introduce their children, probably other children too, to technology. So the problem that So to Speak was having was after their 30-day free trial, the conversion rate of free users to a paid subscription was 10%. So to Speak was interested in enhancing the user experience overall to hopefully increase the number of signups, but they lacked a little clarity on the type of improvements that could be made. So objectives from the brief were to enhance the onboarding experience and the access to articles. And they wanted to have access to everyone who downloaded the app. They wanted to have provide access to resources. And so I decided specifically within these problems to focus on account management features that could be improved and incorporating an entire feature dedicated to resources that everyone could access, including unpaid users. Unfortunately, there are some limitations, although it's a good one. So to Speak does not save any user data due to privacy, and they want to enforce this ethical tech usage. So they have no user information that we could obtain information from. So this limited the ability to obtain any real user insight on a larger scale. And then with time constraints, the sample size that I was pulling from was smaller. But what I did obtain was from personally sourced interviews that I conducted that fit the target demographic, which are parents of children. So tools that I used for the project were Miro, Figma, Usability Hub for testing. The team consisted of the stakeholders, so to speak, our project mentor. My role was the UX UI designer, and overall the timeline for this project was 7 weeks, with specific weeks within them dedicated to discovery research and design and testing. So to further understand So to Speak's mission and goals as a company, I met with Nick Chain. He's the founder of So to Speak. That was step one. And he expressed immense care and empathy toward creating a secure, safe, and responsible messaging app for children. However, they were experiencing the challenges specifically in getting the parents to understand their complicated onboarding concept. They had a complicated onboarding concept in order to protect user privacy and keep it as true and safe as possible. They did this to weed out any fake accounts, any bots. So your children are talking to who they know they're talking to. But this idea wasn't quite landing with parents when they were downloading the app. Another challenge they were having was providing all of the resources for everyone, even if parents didn't decide to subscribe, still didn't have access to those resources. And then again, they wanted to increase the number of signups because, again, the 10% was the conversion rate into a paid subscription. So with these challenges in mind, I met with actual users to get more of an idea where things might be going wrong for them. So I recruited 2 personal contacts who were parents. Their children were ages between 4 and 14, conducted hour-long interviews over video calls. And the first part of the interviews, I was gathering their general beliefs and concerns about technology for their kids, and just to assess their need for an app like So to Speak. In the second part of the interviews, I gathered feedback on their feelings and thoughts as they navigated through the So to Speak app, specifically in a loosely structured usability test. And the biggest takeaways that I got from those interviews were these wants and needs that parents were expressing, really wanting for a messaging app for their kids. those screen time limitations, who their kids are actually talking to, protection from cyberbullying and online predators, control over their contacts and friends list, who they're talking to, making sure there's actually age appropriate content, and online privacy, security. And parents walking through these apps wanted tooltips and FAQs and how-tos. So keeping these points in mind, I wanted to then brainstorm how these could be incorporated with, so to speak, goals of getting parents to understand the challenges that they were experiencing as well. So as part of this brainstorming process, I created a Venn diagram and I compared the issues that, so to speak, was experiencing and the issues that the users were experiencing. And I extracted common themes between both of these and used how might we questions to ideate solutions. So how might we make the platform understandable and usable? How might we make resources attainable at all times? And ultimately, how might we increase the number of downloads and signups? So it became clear to me that reaching these goals could be done by including, so to speak, purpose and values within the app right away, to help users understand what it's all about. Improving the flow of the user's account management controls would be another way of giving parents that seamless control over their child's account and permissions, and that could improve likability of the app. And ultimately, adding a separate section for articles would allow parents an easy access to resources and articles within the app. So I drew out some thoughts into Sketchbook. They, so to speak, had mentioned competitors that I referenced, like Telegraph, Facebook, Messenger for Kids. I looked at those for inspiration on interface and usability designs in the onboarding realm, account management flow, and if they provided any type of articles or resources. And as you'll see in the next few slides, the left-hand side are, so to speak, original screenshots, and my sketch suggestions are on the right. And so for onboarding specifically, this would be the first screen that you would see as a user when you download, so to speak. They provided the articles that they wanted to include right away, but these weren't accessible once the user logged into the account. They could only see these articles after they logged back out of the account and went to look for the articles again. So I decided to take this idea, but switch the information into providing, so to speak, goals and values as a company to give that information to users firsthand versus articles. In regards to resources, on the left image, you can see at the footer, there isn't a tab for any type of article searching or anything because you got it when you downloaded the app. You don't get it when you're inside the app. So my sketch on the right-hand side included a tab where once you selected it, you'd get in and be able to search around for any type of resources based off of topic, age, etc. In the account management, specifically the screen on the left, there are no user controls available. You can't hit, there's no back button, there's no exit button, there's nothing to do in this screen, so it was a dead end. And what I suggested in my sketch on the right, we're just adding a couple of user controls that would give the parent a little more control over their child's account. So I translated these sketches into Figma, using Figma, into some low fidelity wireframes, which I then used for testing. So the first image is the onboarding wireframe with, so to speak, information versus articles. Second is a managing account screen with a little more user control. And the third is a resources screen. So I threw those into Usability Hub, a testing site, and ran 2 usability tests. And so with the first test, when I presented the informational scroll, I asked users to describe afterwards what the app's purpose was, and users reported back understanding SoToSpeak's purpose and values. So what this told me was that their message was clearer at a user's first glance than it was before. And in regards to the managing accounts, I asked users to go in and monitor their child's screen time. Original usability test, this first test, there was a 43% success rate in completing this action. In the click test, users were clicking in the right area, but the accessibility to successfully click was not big enough. And so as a result, users were failing to move forward to the next screen. And as minor or obvious as this may be or sound, it really showed me how crucial these minor specifics are in a user's success or failure in creating an interactive design. And so I assumed and would expect that this number would increase if the accessibility space was widened. And in regards to resources, when I asked users to find an article on cyberbullying, I expected more users to utilize the resource tab that I included in the footer. But click test showed me that users were going to the search bar. And what this told me was that that would be a very helpful feature to add in the app when it wasn't the original thought to begin with. And so I decided to keep that in my designs in future tests. So due to time constraints, I focused on retesting the screen monitoring feature within account management, since it only had that 43% success rate. And I did test a wider clicking accessibility, which of course then increased that success rate to 80%. And so again, that just reiterated how critical it actually is. You can come up with all of the designs that you want, but if the user can actually not even access it, then what is it going to do? It's just going to sit there. So the results from the design test told me that these minor improvements could successfully help users use SoToSpeak. And so on the left-hand side, we've got SoToSpeak's designs beforehand, where it was showing articles right at download. You couldn't access these articles once you were logged in. And so my design afterwards is a suggestion in using SoToSpeak's values and purposes first, and being able to scroll through and obtain that information right at first glance. The manage family members or account management affordances, accessibility allows on the right-hand side just a little more user control in being able to add more accounts, go back, exit out of it, just gives you a little more flexibility versus a dead-end page that you couldn't do anything with. And the resources tab on the bottom, you can see didn't exist on the left-hand side, but in my design suggestion on the right, and with the usability tests, just showed that this would be helpful in addition to a search bar as well. And so throughout this whole process, I would have loved to have more time, of course, but you know, that's just how it goes. But if I did have more time, I would love to just build out additional parental controls and play around and test to see how the flow and usability of those features go. There were numerous kid messaging apps that had activity and gaming centers in it. So I think it would be fun to design something like that and play around with that type of feature and see what kind of retention numbers come up with after that. Voice messaging features, there were a ton of designs that I came up with around this, but never had chance to test them. So that would be really fun. And I would also be really interested to see and play around with the idea of accessing these articles after your free trial. since that was something, so to speak, wanted to offer, how can we access those after the user is done with their free trial? And so then, of course, all of that, I would love to see what the retention numbers come to be. Ultimately, this whole process learned so many things. Mainly is just where to focus your attention, because it's so easy to go down a rabbit hole and get distracted, or just take rabbit holes and try to figure out so many things at one time. But it just, yeah, really reinforced organization and time management. The in-depth practices and creating wireframes and prototypes in Figma. I learned there can never be enough practice in Figma. There's always something to learn, and it's really cool to see things come to life, which also really reiterated the power of letting go for me. That was the biggest one, because there's so many things to learn and you want to make sure everything is working how you want it to. You can't because of time constraints and any other thing. It really reinforces that things don't have to be perfect in order to give a finished product. So with all of that, I thank you for your time. I welcome any and all feedback. Thank you.
Excellent, Kate. Thanks so much for taking us through that. That was really well done, really clear to follow as well. So I will pass over to the panel for feedback and comments, thoughts as well. This can be a two-way dialogue between yourselves and Kate. Who would like to go first? Becca, go for it.
Yeah, beautiful presentation, Kate. I could really tell that you felt a lot of passion about this project, and you really delved into some of these really important and problems for this company, and really framed up your particular problems really well, so that you have something digestible to work on. Fantastic job. I do have a question. Well, it's not so much a question as it is like a weird request. But you allude to the really complicated onboarding process being something that you needed to solve for. I would like to see a visual representation of that complicated onboarding process, because I'm still not really sure what was involved up to this point and how the changes that you made have kind of solved for that problem. I truly believe, because of all the way that you framed why you needed to make these changes to the onboarding process, totally believe you that you need to make a bunch of changes, and it was really complicated before due to that privacy concern and everything. But I would have liked to see a visual representation so I could really understand where that falling out in understanding and motivation was for your users. Beautiful,
Yeah, thank you.
beautiful presentation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, there's just so much information that it's how much do you include? Yes. Anyway, it was trying to weed out what to include and not to include, but including a visual, of course, what I'm explaining makes total sense. So I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
I just understood that to be one of the primary problems that you were solving. And so kind of getting a little bit more of a, being able to digest what that problem is a little bit more directly would have been awesome. I have one more question, if I still have a little bit more, Chris. So you moved the articles off of the splash screen. Totally love it. Really, is there a motivation for increasing signups in that way, or is there sort of I'm not sure what sort of company, so to speak, if they have a motivation to provide these resources regardless of signup status. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so the art, so to speak, really wanted to serve as a resource tool for parents, kind of separate from signups, but they also wanted more signups. So I kind of was playing around with the idea that providing more accessibility to articles, kind of getting more play in that aspect, and saving articles, maybe even creating a library or something like that within the app. Making that a bigger thing would be more interactive for the parents, and then if once their free subscription ran out and maybe they don't have access to that or anything like that anymore, that would somewhat be a prompt that would reinforce them to want to sign up. Something along those lines. But So to Speak did kind of present them as two separate things. They wanted to provide articles. They really just wanted to be that type of resource, but then they also wanted to up their numbers. And it wasn't really like a mutual thing. They just kind of wanted to see both happen.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Thanks, Becca, and thanks, Kate. Chad and Natalie, who would like to take the next one? Chad, sure.
Yeah, +1. The presentation looked great. It looked beautiful. It was easy to follow when you were walking through it. You're very articulate and you're really well spoken. So that works really well as well. One thing that stood out to me is like in the very beginning, I think you defined the problem as a 10% conversion rate problem. And that's usually like, that's like a business metric. That's not really a customer problem, right? So I would probably kind of, if you want to leave that 10% in there, you can leave the 10% in there, but I'd probably talk more about what the customer problem was. You kind of touch on it with the challenges and that kind of stuff later on, like a few slides later, that were really kind of like good, juicy details, right? So me, like as a hiring manager, I'd be looking at like, okay, what's the customer problem, right? We know that obviously when we solve the customer problem, we can increase conversion up, right? So I don't know if 10% is really a customer problem. It's more of a business problem.
Yep, that totally makes sense. And yep, thank you.
No, good.
Oh,
Did you want
no.
to say something?
No, I guess it was more along the lines of, yeah, like it was more of a business problem. And I actually was kind of questioning whether to include it. I mean, it was important, but because this was an isolated project and not a long-term one, I couldn't even measure that change afterwards anyway. And so I'm like, is this even worth holding that type of space in the project? So it does make sense that, you know, it's not necessarily the customer's issue.
Yeah, and I think it's
yeah.
a really good reflection too about the data, right? Because if you knew that you were going to have time to basically show the delta between the improvements, right? You know, you may not want to show that, hey, it's a 10% conversion rate, right? You could basically because if you knew you weren't going to have a chance to go and check it later or show the improvements, you could just say, hey, the conversion rate was really low, right? You don't have to give a specific number. Because my next thing is like some of the, like, I wanted to know like deltas. Like I wanted to see, like you'd mentioned, like where is my from the usability test, right? You talked about how you made improvements with the usability test. Well, my one question to you is, did you do usability testing beforehand on the actual app to justify whether or not those problems existed? Because ultimately, I would love to see that test to say, okay, the new test, the design improvements I had made, you know, increased the different parameters that you had listed on that one page about the usability test, right? I personally want to see the delta, right? Because for someone to say, oh, hey, Chad, you know, I made this better by doing this because the usability test said it was, you know, 10% better. Or 10% better than what? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And I
Yeah.
know you have limited time too, so I totally get it.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I guess I did not specifically run usability testing like on a website or anything. It was just from the user interviews that I conducted, and it was just more of like a loose usability test, like how would you do this? What happens if you do this type of thing? So there wasn't really a specific hard and fast image to compare before and after. It was more of just what I heard and then tested those new designs online and saw results that way. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, it does. Yeah, you talked to some people, they said some things were wrong, then you went back and designed it and then tested it. Yeah, I think, but yeah, it's probably too late to go back and add that in, but that's personally what I would be looking for.
Mhm.
especially if you present usability testing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Kate. I think in the context of this particular project, with the structure of our course, this was very focused on the UI design side of things. And so some of the earlier research, I guess, baseline setting was done in a previous project by another cohort with some research. So it was a little bit of a hybrid type of project in that sense for Kate. But yeah, with more time, this is good advice for anyone when building out usability testing to sort of show that delta. Natalie, would you like to take it away?
I will go along with what Becca and Chad said here, and beautiful presentation, nicely done. I really liked, in particular, like you had a focus on accessibility, you had a focus on users' mental models and like the behaviors they're already engaging with. So like when you were saying, oh, they're going to the search bar to look for resources, like let's leverage that instead of trying to change their like natural behavior. Let's just use their natural behavior to get them where they want to be going. So I thought that was fantastic. I had two main questions or things to point out. The first is that you and I have worked together a little bit. You know, I am a researcher and I always have that like research methodology nonsense going on. I was really curious how you decided. You said like, here are the two things I decided to focus on. You beautifully laid out, here's what the objectives of the project were and like what the company wanted to learn. And here's what I decided to focus on. I would have loved to have just heard a little bit about how you decided to focus on those things and why you were drawn to those areas of improvements or places to operate. And then the other thing, and this is maybe a little esoteric and maybe really specific about this project, but this is a really cool app and product in the sense that there are two different user bases. There's the parents who have one set of expectations and interactions with the app. And then there are like actually the children who are using it for texting their parent, or not their parents, but like for texting their whoever's. And they have a different set of expectations and experiences with the app. And so I know like this seemed very focused, probably for business reasons, probably because that's what like the brief was. This seemed very focused on the parents onboarding and the parents access to resources and the parents experience. And I just like, I'd love to have seen, even if it was just like a sketch as like a, here would be the next step, or like, here's an idea also of how to improve onboarding or even age appropriate resources for the kids, or like what changes in the experience of the children might lead to higher retention also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good points. Thank you. That's really valuable. Because it's true. Yeah, that was a kind of a a slippery little thing with this project is it's like there were the focus on the parent perspective and then how the kids use it as well, and wanting to address all of those. And it can, and that kind of leads into my reflection on this whole project is, where do you focus your attention when there are so many things that you can go down the rabbit hole towards and get lost and then forget what you were doing to begin with? And so it would be, that's good feedback, because I mean, there are a lot of apps out there like that, it just, it kind of is focused towards, multiple users in the same thing. I mean, kids messaging, for example. So yeah, keeping a focus and being able to show other ideas. Anyway, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Thanks, everyone. That was a great segment. Any final comments before we move on to Laura?
Just one quick comment. The one slide when you talked about tools, I usually never put that, like in my portfolio stuff, when I do it, I never put it. It's not really important for me to see. So for me, and hiring manager, it doesn't really matter for me to put the tools in there, like to talk that use Figma. I'm like, I care more about the problem you're solving and the details that you uncover for the customers. That's what I care about most.
Cool. Cool. Thank you.
I also have a tiny suggestion, you know, on your sort of like the page where you were saying what you would do next. You kind of end the list with, you know, measuring the outcomes of the efforts that you just got done presenting. And I would probably like place that first, because that's the next thing you want to do. You always want to be learning. And I would say that's probably the most critical thing. And then you can kind of get into your future ideas and stuff going forward based on the findings that you get and measuring your outcomes.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kate, again. That was awesome.